Feminism, this is a perception. It's a political perception. It is based on a couple of premises which have been building up, and they have been built through the ages. First of all, the gender thing which Rati just mentioned, the gender difference, that is one of the gender difference is the base of a structural inequality which has been there, created between men and women. And in this particular structure, because of the structure, women are systematically oppressed. They have been facing and still continue to face social injustice. That is one. And the other is the inequality which is there, so-called inequality between the sexes. It's not a result of a biological necessity. Biologically, we are different, but that does not make us lesser or more. This is a byproduct. It is a cultural byproduct. It's constructed, and as seen in history, this is what is given rise to the oppression and created this injustice for and feminist theories as such. We when we see what they aim for, they aim to understand social and psychic mechanisms that are in place that create and propagate these particular gender inequalities. Secondly, the fundamental premise, the basic premise of feminist theory is how to address and change this inequality. Yeah. So I'll go on with Mary Wollstonecraft now. I'm audible, right? So I'll continue. Okay. Mary Wollstonecraft, she was famous for a couple of things. First of all, she was a writer. She was an English writer, activist of women's rights, philosopher. She was a founder of feminist philosophies, and her works, it was a very big influence. It was not an influence. So what was her entire work was just not about vindication of rights of a woman. She has done travelogues, she's done travel narratives, letters written during short residence in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. She is written about the history of the French Revolution, a book on conducting oneself, thoughts on education of daughters, 1987. So this is all, she has written this, and a little bit about the background, of what was the scenario at that time. So this is what had happened is the social setup was such at that time. It was difficult for a woman, to express herself. She was just taught to be educated, and the entire goal was to get a husband, get married, and that was the sole aim. There was nothing more to her life than pleasing a man. And women, they were taught particular needlepoint or embroidery or painting and dancing and to play the piano, as we've seen in novels like Pride and Prejudice and many others. They were taught all this to get a good husband for themselves. So what Wollstonecraft in her work she tries to do? She tries to redefine that position, that role which women are had been given for such a long time in society. She tries to change that position, and what she suggests is the first thing, the very basic thing to by which a woman can change, reposition herself, get a better life for herself, is education. And she says that the education which is available to men, the same kind of education should be available for women as well. She says women, the reason they need education, they need to better their minds. They are living in ignorance. They need to be less subservient, less slavish. They have to develop themselves. They are taught particularly to say speak in a manner, behave in a manner, wear a certain kind of clothes, and have a particular demeanor. Everything is created, everything is taught to a woman at that time to aim to please only the man, and that was the sole aim. So education would change that. Education would develop their individualities. And up till then, women writers who were there, they had catered to a particular setup, a patriarchal setup, which women did followed, and they had only, like I said, mentioned before, they had a particular education which was quite superficial. They did not have any kind of career. They did not even aim for a career. They didn't have a support system. The ladies who came from good houses, and we are talking about the romantic age. This is the romantic age, Wollstonecraft's age. The romantic age, women were better. They were a little bit better, but we are looking at, you know, a person, a woman who has come from slightly lesser, economically, maybe unprivileged background. She doesn't have a support system. She gets married, she has a husband, she has a family. But if she fails to get married, she reaches a particular age and she doesn't get proposals, she doesn't have, a marriage proposal and can't get married. She has what kind of a support? She has to rely on her family to support her, or else she can look for a position of a governess. That was the only respectable thing that she could do. She was not encouraged or allowed to do anything beyond that. There was no economic independence for her. And I'll talk a little bit more about, yeah, the author. We'll look at the author, Wollstonecraft, as an author. She is, of course, one of the founders of the feminist theories and a influencer. She has written, as I mentioned, essays, novels, travelogues. She belonged to this particular group in London. She belonged to this group who had revolutionary ideas and fervor. They were led by a person called Richard Price. They had backed a couple of events which took place, like the cessation of the 13 American colonies from Britain in 1775. They supported ideals of the French Revolution, which was 1789. And this group was influenced by a person called John Locke's philosophies. We'll come to that again. He is the person responsible for their, what they call as appeal to reason. That was what it's called. So, Locke's theories, he's a 17th century idealist and philosopher. He propounded this empiric theory. Empiric theory is basically a theory. Empirism is where you can prove something. You do an experiment and you can prove that it works. So that is empirism. Empiric theory, which says that all individuals are born free. They are subject to reason and law of moral behavior. This is John Locke's philosophy. And a vindication, Wollstonecraft's work, is that John Locke's theory made a huge impact, and her writings are very much influenced by that. His is something called the theory of persuasion, and this was also very popular at that time, this particular theory of appeal to reason. And this was popular, and it led to a lot of books being published at that time, books on logic, books on reason. And the idea was that people's minds can be trained to make them obedient to reason. And Wollstonecraft was of the belief that reason was an integral part of nature and part of human nature as well. Wollstonecraft, what she was affected, she was influenced by a couple of things, a couple of people. One was Wordsworth. In his preface, he has spoken about, educating the women as well, educating the mind, and this education is for women as well as men. He did not distinguish. We're talking about the Romantic Age, and he was the biggest influence probably of the Romantic Age. But there was also Rousseau. Rousseau was a person who, he had written Emile. His position, his theory that a woman's position and was something very, very different. And he thought of, a woman as only a companion and only somebody who would be valued when she would be married to a man. And he, proposed that a woman's education should be to please a man. Everything she does, everything she learns, her behavior, her docility, being subservient, listening to the man, keeping the house beautiful, working and bringing up the children, looking after the man, being a good hostess. Everything was basically to please the man. This was something which reacted with Wollstonecraft in a way. That was one of the things which made her write a vindication for the rights, her famous book. She, in fact, dismisses female writers like Madame de Stael and Hester Podzy. This is all there in the study material, incidentally. So they are the ones who supported the patriarchal system. They were called anti-feminists, and there were very few ladies, very few authors. Some of them being Catherine Macaulay and Mrs. Chapone. They were the ones who they were the precursors of women's education. And during the Romantic age, what happened is the society it sat up and it started thinking that a woman's position, it should not remain like this. They should be given a chance to prove themselves. And the women started writing. They became prolific writers. They started talking about their thoughts and experiences on different topics. They started using a language which was more easy to understand than men who used a lot of heavy language. Yeah, women used their experiences, and this was something very novel. This was something which was appreciated by people, and it kind of led to more books. And so they had the opportunity to get some kind of education, but not again. They were not allowed into traditional masculine subjects of maths and all. They were not encouraged to do those. Those were thought of as only masculine subjects, masculine topics, and they were given some rights, but again they were not. Still, it was not. A lot of things had not changed. They didn't have political rights. They had very few vocations. They were kind of legally non-persons. They could not inherit property. Again, that Middlemarch, if we remember what we did, Middlemarch Dorothea, she cannot inherit. So she loses her property after her husband's death. So that is an example. So they were still, and they could not go to the court of law, and they could not, ask for their property that was there. So what could they do? And so Wollstonecraft's work, she gets her data from couple of sources, and Junaid had given two questions in the when he asked us to prepare the PPTs. So I'll just go off just a bit. I'll try and address that first question. It will cover everything. Don't worry about it. Just keep listening. The first question Junaid had put up was Wollstonecraft's contribution to women's right and their education. This is, I suppose, a TEE question. So I'll just go on to that. So the content of that's the content of a vindication. So why is the need? What is the need for a woman to be education? Why do women need to have education? So the need for a woman to have education is, first of all, women don't have access to career or business for their livelihood. They live in ignorance. They are dependent completely on men and external circumstances. If the circumstances are good, so they can have a good life. And if they are from a poorer family, impoverished family, they don't know. I mean, they just have this governor's job to look forward to, and they don't have a lot of options. So they are taught superficial graces to please their husbands. They are misled by a lot of the trivia and which is available in the literature that time. The trivia being constructed by men, written by men. So they were taught all this, and they kind of believed in it, and they were encouraged to remain immature in understanding, and they believed that it was convenient for them to be like that. It was just a way for a man to control a woman to do what they wanted. That was what it was all about. So women were basically condemned to a life of bondage to this kind of reality. So her book Vindication it's one of the it was a controversial book, a trailblazer, if you can call it that, in feminism, because it dared to redefine a woman's position in society. Wollstonecraft dismisses the cultivation of traditional female virtues, being subservient, being doing the service for the house, being only for the house, and arguing that women could not be good mothers and wives and manage households if they weren't educated. That is what Wollstonecraft, her theory was, that if you wanted to be a good mother, if you wanted to be a good wife, you have to be educated, you have to understand and build and develop your own personality and understand so many things, what your man has, what your husband has studied, what your what this, there is so many things in the world that you should know about. You will be a good, better companion to your husband, and you will have a better marriage, be a better person, ultimately be a happier person, having a happier marriage, if you are educated. But unfortunately, at that time, a woman's focus remained on maintaining her appearances, wearing good clothes, stylish clothes, whatever was going on then, and she sacrificed her intelligence. She was not allowed to think. She was allowed to believe that she could not think, and if she would think too much, it would not be good for her. It would be detrimental. So Wordsworth and Rousseau's Emile, they were concerned with the education, training the human mind, but Rousseau's text was, of course, totally pro men. Yeah, it was totally written to the advantage of a man. And so, what she thinks, what Wollstonecraft thinks, there should be a particular kind of education which would, be there for a woman as well as for a man. And she demanded full equality of civil rights and political rights for women. That came much more later, of course. I don't think she saw any of it, but she demanded that, regardless of class and gender, the education should be there for everyone, open to both men and women, the same kind of education. Yeah, and then there's a second question. I'll just address that question. The question says, nature of revolution in women's education proposed by Wollstonecraft. The nature of revolution in women. What was the nature of this? This is another question which will possibly come in the TEs. So, what is the kind of revolution in women's education proposed by Wollstonecraft? So she redefines a woman's position. She says women are essential to the nation because they are educating the children. They are educating the next generation as mothers. And you cannot have a better generation if you do not have good mothers, good educated mothers. They can't even be good companions to their husband if they are just being wives. And women, instead of women being just property or ornaments in a social setup to be traded in marriage, Wollstonecraft says that women should be regarded as human beings that deserve the same basic rights as man. She believed women would do much better if they weren't focused from an earlier age on the outward beauty and being decorative. Education is integral to the development of her identity. The mind, at an early age, if it is disciplined by education, then that mind, a woman's mind, will not be subservient. She will question. And Wollstonecraft argues that children should be sent to a country day school as well as be educated at home to inspire the love of home and domestic pleasures. So, and then there's another question. The third question is a TEE question again. From tyranny of man, the greater number of female follies proceed. Yeah, in the light of the statement, evaluate Wollstonecraft's thoughts on women. So basically, this quote, from tyranny of man, the greater number of female follies proceed. This is an analysis of chapter 13 in Wollstonecraft's text. It talks about the follies generated by women's ignorance, and uneducated women, or a woman who is not properly educated. So it's divided into a couple of sections. I will just quickly try and take you through the sections as fast as possible. Yeah, so the first section, Wollstonecraft accuses women readers of being the cause of their own oppression. Because of their own oppression, because of their own ignorance, since they are not educated properly, a lack of proper education, they go to persons like quacks, astrologers to predict the future. They get influenced by romantic novels, they get cheated, taken advantage of, and even losing their honor, their virginity, which is the most precious thing at that time. There are these people who are swindlers, so they dupe people, women like these, because women are not educated. They don't understand. If they believe that something good will happen if I go to an astrologer, or do a particular thing, wear a particular charm or something, I will, if it's good for me, I should do it. They don't question, and there have been clergymen who've taken advantage of their position. So this is one. Second section, she addresses the mind of a sentimental woman. A sentimental woman meaning the one who reads, silly novels, and which was written by the so-called anti-feminists. As I mentioned before, those women, they wrote, that a man, is superior to woman, and women should behave in a certain way, and look at a man who is a gentleman who dresses well and who speaks well. I mean, a woman would be just very, very fortunate if she could get married to someone like that. So, yeah, so Wollstonecraft is critical of women authors who publish these kind of novels, because these women are then misled, and they don't read good actual things like history or relevant material which would actually educate their mind. Instead, they read these sentimental stuff which harms them instead of doing good. So she says women should definitely, by education, they will learn to discriminate between a good novel from a bad one, and they will discard the ones which are damaging. The third section, she says, Wollstonecraft says, women, they put a lot of effort into appearance and outer dress, and they in fact are their own enemies of their own sex. They put their own women friends down, and that's not something they would do if they were educated, and they would understand that appearances are not everything, and they would not be so judgmental about another woman and condemn another woman for not conforming to particular norms which was there in the society at that time. Yeah. Then there's a fourth section which is about humanity and sensibility, which a woman who is educated, she would possess that. That's what Wollstonecraft says. An uneducated woman would be a selfish one, because she would be insecure about her status in society. She would be confined and limited to doing certain things in the house, and and a woman who would be educated would understand there's more to life than being looking good, looking after the house, and there's so much more. There are subjects to study, languages to learn, and there's so much more. So a woman would, in that kind of woman, would be more sensible. Then section 5 is about childbearing, and women are said at that time they relied a lot on servants for bringing up their children, which was something Wollstonecraft says this was not the thing, because servants are going to impart their values to your child. So finally, your child, if they are being brought up by servants, they are not learning your values. Plus the fact that women, they abuse their servants openly because of that rank and class difference. Women who are uneducated, they think, oh, I'm of a certain class, and my maid servant who's working in my house, she doesn't deserve anything better. I mean, she's lucky I'm doing whatever I'm doing for her. So they make the mistake of openly abusing their servants in front of their children, setting a bad example. And they also, of course, treat their children like demigods, making them, pampering them, spoiling them. Uneducated women, they do not make good mothers, so they should be educated, and therefore, if they get those values, they'll impart them to their children. The last section is concluded with the remark that a woman's mind needs to be cultivated, because they will develop love for their country as well, besides having, you know, nobility, sensibility, more humanity, developing virtues. So husbands and wives, they will have more in common. Their marriage will be strengthened. And there is a quote saying, "Virtue flies from a house divided, and a whole legion of devils take up their residence there." So this is something which Wollstonecraft believes in, and she says that women's failure, it's a consequence of their education and station in society. If they were allowed to have the same fundamental rights and freedom, they would definitely progress towards perfection and be more virtuous. Okay. Um, Women's rights were linked to socialism, and They were, one second. Just a moment. Yeah, so women's rights were linked to socialism at the beginning of the 19th century, which was pioneered by Wollstonecraft. And there are some important points from the text, The Vindication. I'll just try and read out a couple of them and keep it simple and short. Chapter 6, particular chapters are mentioned. Chapter 13, chapter 6 is mentioned in the study material. You could, write a bit when you write, solve your answers, and you can mention a couple of things. It stresses on early association of ideas, on the developing of character. What I just repeated, the importance of education, which brings about a change in a particular person, change in a woman over here, individual identity which is created, and very importantly is a woman, once she gets educated, she has confidence, the confidence which she lacks earlier. She That slavish mentality which she has, she discards that. She slowly she discards that. She becomes more confident. And women, they don't have access to education or business or something to fall back upon. They are prone to being duped. So Mary Wollstonecraft sees reasoning as an integral part of human nature, and she sees education as important for the same reason. Okay. Just Yeah, there are a couple of points which I'll mention, which Wollstonecraft uses her data. She uses a couple of things to build up her work. Two things, two very important things she mentions in her text Vindication is, first of all, the literature which was available at that point in time. She believes they were very destructive and damaging by nature because they promoted a particular image of a man and a particular image of a woman the way she should be, rather. We have novels like Richardson's Clarissa, and where the rake is a person basically who was an experienced person. He had a lot of affairs, and she talks about the rake culture. There was a rake culture which exploited women. You see this in the novel Clarissa, and we also see a bit of it in Tom Jones. We've done Tom Jones in last year. In Tom Jones, what we see is the protagonist, when he leaves house, when he runs away and leaves house, he before and even later, he is not he is not absolutely pure and virtuous. Yeah, he has affairs. He has affairs more than once, and he still gets the girl in the end. So that kind of a thing, I mean, a woman could not do that. She had to be pure and chaste, and she that literature, it did a lot of damage, and it also exploited, in the literature, it exploited the heroine. The Restoration age, which it shows the reformed rake, they, it seems, made the best of husbands. And theater characters also had the rake, who they showed, he was emotionally hollow. He didn't have substance, but he used a lot of wit and good clothes and manners to win a hand of a woman. So she says, Wollstonecraft says that this is a very damaging, a very dangerous thing, which was a trend at that time. And the second thing which is there is the perception of a man and a woman towards each other, because of having the kind of education, the literature which was available. A man believed something about a woman, and a woman believed something. So a woman and men and women, they had this idea that a man believed, okay, a woman should be very docile. She would be pretty to look at. She would be gentle. She would be knowing certain skills like needlepoint, and, like I mentioned, piano, playing piano, even drawing, and maybe even dancing. And so these kind of things, they set up and made an image of a woman, which every other woman at that time reading that literature believed, oh, you should be like this is how you have to be. And a man, they had a man, if a man was a gentleman, if a man dressed nicely and he had very nice manners, he spoke very well, he was the ideal man. So an example of this is in the novel Pride and Prejudice, where we see Lydia, she's fooled by Wiccan and they elope. She makes the wrong choice. Whereas, again, another example is Charlotte. Charlotte is the slightly older friend of Elizabeth Bennet. She is completely dependent on marrying a buffoon like Mr. Collin, because she has to secure her future. So this is the kind of defective education which was given at that time to women, and because of that, the social setup was such that women were bound to find that kind of husband. I mean, a person like Mr. Collins, he was so full of himself because Elizabeth Bennet would not inherit. She would not inherit. Jane, actually being the older one, she would not inherit. None of them would inherit. He was the only other heir in line. So he was absolutely sure that he would marry one of the Bennet sisters, even though he looked like that and he behaved like that. He was such a silly man. So that novel was a portrayal of those times and Wollstonecraft's thesis. Can you change the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So Wollstonecraft's contribution, I'll just talk about that a little. Uh, Wollstonecraft, what she says is she appeals for women's education. She appeals for women's education, but the ironical fact is, what she appealed to for women, she had to appeal to men. I mean, she had to literally, she had to write a letter to the Bishop Talleyrand of France, to persuade for granting rights to women, which was due to them. And she said that ultimately she was dependent on the mercy of men to grant them rights as a woman. So her concerns regarding the women's rights, they were seen in the context of women's rights. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, they have to be applied equally, both to men and women. That's what she believed. Socialism and feminism, they were linked inextricably with Mary, as she was the pioneer of these joint ideals. Socialism is something which went hand in hand, according to her, with feminism. You could not have one without the other. She stated that to wipe out the existing inequalities, you had to abolish a couple of things. One of them is division of gender, class, and wealth. And her work was addressed to women who she felt that they have to realize what their rights were regarding education and what it would do to their lives, how their life would change. And I'll just tell you what was the impact of her text. So the immediate impact was that women's rights, they were not seen as a complete, it was not a separate compartment. So it was a part of the liberation of humanity, because women were 50% of the humanity, obviously. There was a link between class-based issues, socialism, and gender-based issues, like feminism, where feminism is concerned. So some people might say that because of this link, feminist concerns, they were not given the individual place, and because of that, they might lose their edge. That was one thing. Then what happened is the revolution of women's rights, it got tied up with other issues. But you cannot have one revolution without another. I mean, if you talk about freedom and equality, but where you have equality for men, if you're treating a woman in that particular manner, so that is again an infringement of human rights. So you cannot have one without the other. And main thing is her ideas. What happened is, at first when she passed away, her ideas, they were not, they were not there. They were not bringing any reforms. There were no immediate reforms. There was a lot of controversy because her personal life, she had 2 children without wedlock. So there was a big hue and cry with that. And those people, they were of that mindset, and her ideas for education, they had to wait. But in the 1870s, slowly, the field of education, there was a upsurge in a lot of women's colleges, which happened in Oxford and Cambridge. There was a thought process and which her works earlier, when what they could not do in the 1840s. In fact, members of the emerging movements, in America as well as in Europe, they resurrected. They brought up some of her books, the principles in the books. And I'm naming two people over here: Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Margaret Fuller. These are the two people who were uh, the ones who took the movement forward. So, Rati, can you change the slide? I'll just wrap up over here.
Do we put the other one on? This is the last slide.
Yeah. I'm just wrapping it up. This is the conclusion. So there is a small little bit mentioned in the study material. I'll just finish here. What